Fall vibes alone aren't enough for a story, but how do you infuse your writing with that autumn aesthetic? Let's talk about that. I've already got one video about describing your setting in a more interesting way, so you might want to check that out before you watch this one. But it's got some general tips for making your readers actually see the setting of your story instead of you just telling them it. By the end of this video, you'll be much better equipped to deliver on those autumn vibes that you promised, and you'll feel more inspired to create settings that would rival even another rewatch of Gilmore Girls. If you're new here, hi, I'm Katri, I'm your new writing bestie. Today I'm pointing at you with a raven, and this is Protagonist Crafts, the place for people who are kind of obsessed with that whole writing thing. So what's actually significant about autumn? Well, think about nature and especially what it looks like. Think about weather and coziness and what kind of activities are there in autumn. Oh, and also clothing. So I'm going to focus on how to describe that autumnal setting through your characters' 5 senses and through their interactions with their environment and through their actions. So let's start from nature and especially trees. Instead of just saying the leaves had turned yellow, you could say the yellow leaves were flapping in the wind. She picked up a yellow leaf from the ground and smiled. Autumn had always been her favorite season. Perhaps because her birthday was on October 26th. You have missed it by now, but you might want to mark it on your calendar to, be prepared for next year. Yes, I was talking about myself. Instead of saying the leaves had already fallen to the ground, you can mention that someone had already raked the leaves into neat piles on their backyard. Or you could describe how the branches were bare against the grey sky. You could actually see the neighbor's house now that there weren't leaves blocking the way. That would also naturally make your readers assume, I don't know what I'm doing here, assume that it's later in the autumn and that it might also be kind of cold. Do you always have to write like that? Well, obviously not. You could just say the leaves had fallen or the leaves were yellow. But if you want the full vibes to be there, then you do need to set the scene. You have to drop your readers into your world instead of you just reporting it to them. And speaking of later in the autumn, when it's being cold, below freezing in the night, what does it look and sound like? How do the frozen leaves crunch under your boots? And what do they look like when they're glittering in the morning sun? You're so quiet. You've never disturbed me in your life or in your death. You're setting a fine example to the other cats. Imagine it's early morning and your character is going to school or going to work. What does an early morning in autumn feel like and sound like and smell like? Is your character's retired neighbor already raking leaves on their yard because, he got up at 5 a.m. so he's got to be doing something by 8. And can you smell the smoke coming from that chimney? Because obviously they've got the fire on already. Don't worry, his wife is supervising the fire. This is a safe neighborhood. Maybe it's still a little foggy that early in the morning and the fog is hiding the trees and the buildings from your character. How mysterious. Does it smell crisp or does it smell like fallen mushy leaves? What else might there be outside? That obviously depends on where your characters live, and I live in a small town in eastern Finland, so the B-roll in this video is very much colored by my actual location, and really I don't have great big insights on what October is like in the middle of London, for example. And I'm trying not to be specific about the month here anyway when talking about autumn, because when autumn actually begins and ends, it very much depends on how much in the north or how much in the south you are. And if you live in the southern hemisphere, then all of this goes like blip, blip, blip. And I have no idea how to talk about autumn in a place where they don't eventually get proper winter. I'm sorry, Australia, but the best I can do is to remember that your Christmas is at the same time as everyone else's. Anyway, sunlight is always interesting in autumn if you're getting any. The light filters through the yellow leaves or perhaps makes the fallen frozen leaves glitter on the ground, like we already talked about, I guess. If you're walking outside late in the evening, you can see the warm orange rectangles of other people's windows in the dark night. And when it's been raining, you can see the street lights reflecting from the puddles apples. Yes, we do have streetlights here. Imagine that. What does the sky look like? Is it bright and sharp, or is it smothered by grey rain clouds? Well, let's say it's earlier in the autumn. Can you see birds? Not birds. Can you see berries in the bushes or fruits in the trees? Or if you've got a tree with berries in it, what does it sound like when there's a flock of little birds trying to eat them? What kind of a soundscape is your character walking through? And if you've got an apple tree on your story, your character can also be interacting with it. So first, they see the round red apples hanging from the tree like little gifts. And then they reach over the neighbor's fence and they take one of the apples and bite into its crispy flesh. Or maybe your character's on a walk with their dog, who's wearing a seasonal jacket, of course, and they see that their neighbor has a surplus of apples and a little sign saying, "Take as many as you want, they're free." And then she takes like a, armful of apples and takes them home and, I don't know, bakes a lovely apple pie. Or, I don't know, maybe they go foraging for mushrooms. So what does it look like and smell like in the woods then? I'm personally not a fan of mushrooms. I think they smell like death's ass, but, each to their own. I could still write characters who go pick for mushrooms, but hopefully not these ones. These are adorable, but not edible. All right. I'm sorry for being so rural. I live in a small town, and the biggest place I've ever lived in was Leeds, and that was during summer months, so that is not helpful here. I have been to Manchester in December, so that isn't helpful here either. Sorry. I will be talking about trees and bushes and forests and lakes and stuff, but like I said in my other video, if you'd like me to go to London and then create a video about how to write about London, then, buy my stuff, send me money. I don't know. So if this particular video isn't helpful for the specific setting that you are currently writing or wanting to write, I'm sorry, I guess. But anyway, here's another outdoors thing that might just depend on where you live, and that is migrating birds. So are they leaving you to fly to the south? Or perhaps you are in the south, wherever that is, and they are coming to you. Geese, for example, they just can't stop from yapping to their friends all the way that they're flying, so you can usually hear them before you can even see them. But then with birds like whipperswans and sometimes with cranes, you're lucky if you can hear them go hee-haw above you as they fly. If you don't notice them early enough, then you've just missed them. Does your character spend a lot of time outside trying to see the birds? What do the birds maybe signify? Are they a metaphor for something? That could be interesting. And when your character is standing on the yellowed field waiting for the flocks of birds to fly above them, what are they wearing? And you don't usually want to be listing it like, she was wearing this kind of jacket and she was wearing these shoes and she was, no. You might want to introduce it sort of more organically. You could just be like, she dug out her pink suede gloves out of the pocket of her yellow London fog trench coat that she only got to wear during this time of the year, and adjusted her blue silk scarf that made her feel expensive, but that she'd bought from a second-hand shop and wasn't even real silk. When she walked, the wet fallen leaves got stuck in the soles of her brown leather boots. And think of the specific vibes that you want your story to be, radiating. Are they perhaps like academia aesthetic, or maybe something more cozy? Well, the clothes that your characters are wearing do play a part in that. And if you have a difficult time imagining that or seeing it for yourself, then go on Pinterest and then, look for suitable pictures and then imagine those are your characters. Is this stuff very, very important to writing stories? Of course not. But this video specifically is about how to write those autumn vibes. So this is something that you're going to need. So let's stay outside a little longer, but let's go where other people are as well, not just birds and mushrooms. Maybe there are leaves there too, and maybe there's frost on the wrought iron fences that surround the fancy buildings that your character has to walk past on their way to their favorite coffee shop. Maybe a car splashes dirty puddle water on them. I don't know. Do the shop fronts look different now in autumn? Maybe there are seasonal decorations. Maybe there are pumpkins everywhere. Or is it just the same shit there as every other season, except in a different temperature? If so, I can't really help you there. I think your characters need to call a moving truck and go somewhere where they can get a pumpkin spice latte while jumping on piles of fallen leaves. And speaking of moving, Okay, that was a very bad segue, but what are your characters actually doing when they're outside? I know we already talked about some of this, but it's a good thing to think about when you're trying to get those vibes into your story. So what kind of outdoors activities are there? Maybe they're preparing the garden for the winter and the glass walls of the greenhouse are all fogged up in the eerie morning light. Are they going for a hawk? Are they going for a hike at the national park and taking pictures of the wonderful scenery? You know, right before pushing their best friend off a cliff. I don't know what kind of a story you're writing. Oh my God, Clara, I'm so sorry. Come back. Come back. I'll never do that to you again. I'm sorry. Oh, but it's getting cold now, so let's get back indoors. Personally, I love November, and around here it's maybe not an autumn month because usually we get snow in November, but let's include it here anyway. I love November precisely because it's dark and wet and gloomy outside. So isn't it just wonderful to get indoors? You've been outside, you got cold, now you're inside. You can wrap up in a blanket and have a hot drink. What could be cozier than that? So what do people do to make their homes cozy? Your characters could be surrounded by blankets and hot water bottles and candles. Maybe there's fire roaring in the fireplace, and actually, what else can they hear? Is the rain tapping on the tin roof? Is the wind whistling in the windows? And what does it smell like besides, hot chocolate and candles? Perhaps the apple pie that they've just made from the apples that they took from their neighbor. Well, no, that was a different month, but maybe it still smells like that. It's very easy to have this like a cozy image in your mind as you're writing and then not actually put it on the page because, of course, you can see it when you read your writing, because it was already in your head. But that isn't enough. You do have to make sure that it actually ends up on the page as well for your readers to see. Saying that it was so cozy and nice will do absolutely nothing. You need to show the pile of books on the coffee table and the steam coming up from the mug of hot chocolate while your character is revising for her exam on British literature. Speaking of which, do you want to talk about Dickens? I want to talk about Dickens. If you want us to talk about Dickens, do let me know. I have a lot of thoughts. What kind of indoors activities could your characters take part in when it's autumn? Are they decorating their house with little fairy lights and pumpkins? Or maybe they're making jams. Maybe it's time to climb up to the attic to get the winter clothes down and to put on the coziest sweater that they can find. Knitting actually is the worst, but isn't it cozy? It is, isn't it? But what if you don't want to be cozy? What then? Maybe the candlelight casts long shadows in the dark corridors, and you can feel the draft coming from the windows. You can hear the waves crashing onto the shore, and you just know it's going to be a long and dark night, with the wind howling and the bare tree branches tapping onto the window like needy skeletons. Are you a needy skeleton? No, you're not. Maybe a character is sitting by the window in their apartment and watching the world go by, while the raindrops stain the window, making it look like an impressionist painting. Whatever kind of mood and tone you're going for, if you want your story to be full of those autumn vibes, you need to create rich and interesting settings. And then you need to make your readers actually see those settings through your character's senses and their interactions with their environment. If you'd like me to make more videos like this, there's definitely going to be one about winter when it actually is winter. Do let me know, and I will see you, I don't know where, but you could just watch another video.